Hi, in this video, my brother and I are going to talk about a book that seems to be very popular to booktubers. It's called Klara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro, and we're just going to have a discussion about it, kind of off the cuff, and see what we each think of it and various parts of the book and some of the themes and stuff that happen in the book itself. So, Sam, do you want to add anything to that real quick, or?
No, it sounds good.
Okay.
Just that we both read a lot and figured we'd read something that a lot of other people like and see how we felt about it.
For those of you that don't know, Klara and the Sun is about an artificial friend, which is essentially, I don't know, it's like a robot, right? You took it as a robot, right? It's like an AI robot that is basically created so that people can have a companion for their child, basically. And it is supposed to help the child learn and be a friend to the child when the parents aren't around, that kind of thing. So that's basically what it is. The book itself is told from Klara's point of view, and Klara is an artificial friend, and she gets connected to this girl named Josie, who has some issues of her own, and we'll talk about that just ahead of time. This will probably have spoilers in it because I'm not sure how deep of a conversation we could really have without having spoilers. So hopefully, if you don't like spoilers, probably should turn the video off now. In the beginning, she's in the store, all right? And I kept making notes as I was reading this section, and I thought this book was going to go in this really weird slavery metaphor kind of way because they were in the robots were in the artificial friends were in the display window, and people kept coming by and looking at them as almost like wealthy people looking at slaves way back in the day, you know.
Yeah.
And then there was like this weird red light district connection where I don't know. I've been to the red light district in Germany with some friends a long time ago. Didn't do anything, so don't look at me weird like that, people. But one of my friends knew how it worked, and he told me that they wouldn't say anything to you until you spoke to them first. And there's like this whole thing about that in one part where a kid walks up to the window and is looking at Klara and her other, I forget the name of the other one that was there with her.
Rosa.
Rosa, yeah. And Klara has like this weird almost sixth sense for like an artificial intelligence, and she has more of an empathetic personality than all the other um, artificial friends that are talked about in the book. Did you get any of that kind of vibe?
Yeah, I thought it. I also thought it was going to go and talk about like robot rights and like I thought she was going to show some. I thought the direction it was going to go was that she was going to show some sort of preternatural intelligence, maybe the really first truly intelligent sort of AI robot at that level that was available to normal people, right? And I thought it was going to be all about like, does she deserve personhood, kind of, right? Like I thought that was what it was going. Because like, you're right, like when they were in the very beginning when they're brand new and they get put in the window and everything, and it's sort of like that. She talks about how the manager of the store tells them, don't interact with the people who come to the window. Instead, pick a point like on the building across the street and just stare at that point because you're not supposed to like interact with them. And I was like, oh, like yeah, I was thinking along the same lines you were. But I think the point was actually that they're not supposed to show that they recognize that they're about to be bought or that they could be consumer goods. And they're not supposed to. They're also not supposed to seem like they're enticing the children, to beg their parents to take them in and buy that one, right? So they don't interact until the child interacts.
Yeah, actually, one of the bits I highlighted was when there's a girl that comes to Klara and seem or a boy and seems interested, but when they ask her a question, Klara reacts kind of not as friendly as she should have been, and the manager notices it, and when they leave, the manager I think tells her the child picks the artificial friend. The artificial friend doesn't pick the child. So that kind of goes along with what you're saying there.
Yeah.
So yeah. The other things about the store that were interesting to me was I didn't quite get the connection, the issue with in the very, very beginning, when the one robot stepped into the light and it went away, I whatever that was about, I must have completely missed it. Did you get that?
I also that part was very clunky to me. I felt like I missed something, but I think the whole point of that section was just to show how their solar, right? Like their whole power source is recharged with solar energy. So that was kind of the way to show the audience, the reader, hey, this is what happens. And for some reason, like maybe they didn't they didn't understand that. Like I think it was supposed to show two things. Number one, their kind of childlike non-knowledge or lack of knowledge about the world, but yet they kind of knew, like Klara knew, and so she put her whatever hand or whatever, or she stepped into. I can't remember exactly what she did, but she exposed part of her body to the sun, and it like pulled all of it. So I don't know if there was like a charging station or something that was there that had to do with like light output at the charging station or whatever. But and then there was this weird part about that where the other robot accused her of being selfish and taking it for herself, and was like telling her, trying to make her feel bad that, oh, you took it all and you're selfish, and now I'm winding down. I already don't feel good, or something like that. And I was trying to figure out, like, are they trying to show that these things actually have feelings, or are they just trying to show that Klara has feelings? But then it did this weird thing where she didn't believe the kid. It was a little boy robot, and she didn't believe him. She's like, no, you're just trying to make me feel bad. I don't believe you. I don't believe you. And it was like, what is this? Is it just trying to show their childlike conversation, or that they don't really understand about the sun, but now the audience knows that they're solar powered? Like, I couldn't really. It felt very clunky the way it was being presented, because everything else about the store wasn't clunky. Anytime the manager was involved, there was sort of this very high level ideal of the managers treating you. This is the other reason I thought it was going to be about like AI robot rights, because the manager treated them very fairly and tried to have like a system where no robot got special privileges, no matter what model they were, and like all that kind of stuff. And she noticed Klara was different in some way, but like then it had that weird thing about the sunlight or the charger. I don't know. I felt like that was a very clunky scene as well.
Yeah, I agree. It just, the whole thing read really clunky. It was almost like Ishiguro sat down and he started typing, and he wasn't 100% certain where he was going with the whole scene itself. But he probably was, I mean, I think the guy's won a Pulitzer Prize or something.
Yeah.
And he's
Nobel, right? Didn't he win a Nobel in literature?
Maybe that's what it was. I don't know. I didn't look it up. But I know he's pretty famous, especially for The Remains of the Day, which was made into a movie and all that kind of stuff. And he's got plenty of other books out there too.
Right.
So yeah, I do think he's probably a bit of an acquired taste, especially based on reading this book. But anyway, with
I mean, I don't know. Some writers will tell you that they just start writing, and like the story that evolved isn't necessarily something they had planned. Like certain parts are like, oh, I was kind of surprised that went in that direction too. Not that it's not in their own mind or whatever, but just the idea of, hey, I'm going to start with this scene and let's see where it goes. Like maybe that's what happened, or maybe there was some editing weirdness or something. Because I mean, the rest of the book is quite readable. Like I understood. There was only, I think, one other part where I didn't really understand what he was trying to show. But otherwise,
yeah. The only other part that I thought was difficult to figure out and was the whole thing with her seeing things in cubes, like during the party with the kids. That really kind of threw me. I didn't get it. You had a theory on that, right?
Yeah, at first I also was thrown off by that. I was like, what is it talking about? Like suddenly everything's in cubes. And then I realized, I think it was trying to show the fact that her sensory systems are based on the optics perceiving her surroundings as small chunks, almost like the eye of an insect or something, where everything is at least, but instead of having the entire field of view in each chunk, like sometimes is depicted like in a bee's eye or something, instead it's like her field of view is split into all these different pixels. And at first when she walks into a new place, the pixels haven't sort of put everything together yet into one full picture. So that's part of the reason why they talked about it was hard when the robots, when the artificial friends go to a new place. It's hard for them to get around if the family hasn't really prepared to give that robot time to get used to the surroundings, and they end up tripping and falling and like hurting themselves and whatnot because it takes a while for their internal mechanisms to see everything as one view. And then if anything ever changes, they were used to it in one view. So when she walked into where the kids were having the party, when she walked in there, remember the whole point was the room was completely different from how it had been before, which is why everything was in squares, because now she had to sort of reconstitute the image of what that room is supposed to be to her. And because, but it was written weirdly because the way that he described, like, when the one kid was like sitting on the couch, but his leg was out beside him, and so for her it was in like two different boxes, right? But then later on, when she was focusing on like eyes of people, it would like show, like, I feel like it evolved into being something else entirely. Well, maybe something else maybe on top of that, because it evolved, like she would talk about seeing the eyes of someone, and she could almost tell if they were suspicious or were having some kind of thought or emotion about a situation, or if they were going to be like when she would, like the mother, when she went to the what was it, that park that she went to with the mother, and the mother asked her to walk.
They went up to that waterfall place.
Yeah, and then after she did it, like the mother was staring at her, and she described that again, where she was looking, and suddenly the mother's face was all squares, and like one eye was real big, and one was very narrow, and it was like, to me, the author was trying to tell us, oh, she's noticing that the mom is feeling a certain kind of way about this, but because she's a robot, she's having a hard time, like, really figuring out what the true feeling is. However, she's this weird robot with some empathy, so she kind of understands, but, like, I don't know. Like for me, I was like, well, maybe if he was trying to say the robot can read faces, but it's not, like, instantaneous. Like, for a human, if somebody walks in the room and they're really upset, sad, and they've been crying, you can tell immediately, right? Even if you ask them, are you okay, is there anything going on, they're probably going to tell you no, like it's a coworker or something, right? But you know they've been upset, that they're, or if somebody's really pissed off and mad, you know, and they leave a meeting, and you can look at their face and tell, oh, for us, it's almost instantaneous, right? For neurotypical people, some neurodivergent people, it's not as instantaneous, but for us, it's instantaneous. But for the robot, she's kind of like, she's not really, she knows something's happening, but she doesn't really know how to read it. But then she eventually comes to that conclusion. So I think the eye square thing did double duty there.
Okay. Yeah. That also your theory about the way things change and then they have to like readjust also explains the whole issue with why gravel would really throw her off. You know, like there's the scene where she's walking down the road or going up on a hill or something, and there's gravel and she has to be real careful because, you know, gravel is going to shift, it's going to move constantly depending on how well it's sitting and everything. So that kind of would kind of fit with that as well. So that's actually an interesting thing that he would come up with that and use gravel to show that. But it's very subtle.
The other thing is, when she walks across, when she goes across the field to go to the barn, and she's having a real hard time, and she's like, oh, there's gullies and there's this. And I feel like there aren't really gullies. It's more that there's tiny potholes, right? Tiny slight deviations in the ground, because it is a field that has been tilled, so there are rocks and clumps of dirt. And for her, that's like a huge, you know, those are gullies and troughs and things she has to avoid. But it also made me think, you know, when she was looking out the window, she would say things like, oh, I saw, when she was still in the store, she would say, oh, I saw a child and their artificial friend was behind them or whatever. But they never really described, as far as I can remember, the actual artificial friends as being in like humanoid, human type robots, like bodies. Did they ever describe what the actual artificial friends look like?
I always took them to be human, like,
I did too.
Especially because of what was actually going on in the background with the mom.
Right.
So
yes, that's true. That's true with the model, right? With the portrait, quote unquote portrait. Yeah. Right.
I
That's true.
always
You're right. Yeah.
I always made the assumption that they were some sort of human form, because I don't think kids of a certain age or younger would really be able to um, become friends or accept something that didn't look similar to them or other people as just like this instant friend that was supposed to be part of their lives and help them out. You know, on the waterfall trip, the thing. So they're going up and she sees the bull, right? And I'm like, what? So to me, she was looking at this bull and she just saw nothing but, like, it was almost like she saw pure evil in this bull just standing there by the fence. And I'm like, okay, you're seeing this evil bull, but there's sheep all around it. So is that a metaphor for something? And then there were a couple other things that made me wonder if there's a little chunk later in the book. I forget exactly what the phrasing was, but for whatever reason, it caused the whole Minotaur myth, you know, with the labyrinth and everything, to pop into my head. And I was just like, what? Why is this a thing? What was the thing with the bull? And all I could think of was there some sort of weird thing with the bull? The other thing was there was a mirror that her dad gave her, right? And it supposedly showed her true face, gave to Josie, and it showed her true face. And so I had to look it up. I was like, was there a mirror in the Minotaur myth? And the answer is no, but some people do think that the Minotaur myth thing had something to do with, like, a mirror of the mind. Like, your mind is very complicated and has dead ends, and sometimes you have to turn around and that kind of thing. And I didn't, the whole bull thing, that might feed into what you were saying about, you know, maybe she went up to the waterfall thinking or considering the mother one way, but then after they sat there and they had that conversation, and like you said, she gave her that look, and the whole vision thing coalesced in her eyes, and she got that kind of empathetic feeling about what the mom might be thinking. Maybe that had something to do with the whole bull thing. I don't know. I'm probably stretching here, but yeah.
Yeah, I felt like the bull thing, for me, I think at the first, I just chalked it up to, because she brought up the bull later on, too.
Yeah.
She remembered that she had seen the bull when she was, and I think it had some sort of, like, almost demonic significance or something later on. It was like, that's the evil part of the world.
Yeah, it was the darkness, the darkness of the world.
The darkness, right. And she said, oh, that bull is so dark, and you know, I also got the idea of evil, right? Like, oh, it's so dark, it must have come from underground and just burst up. You know, bad things burst up from the ground when the sun is not able to shine on it or something. Like, for me, I felt like when I was first reading about the waterfall part of it, it was, to me, it was almost like, okay, you have to remember this person, if we assume they're a person, this AI robot has never ever been outside other than walking from the store to the car or vehicle, and then walking from the vehicle into the house of Josie and her mom, and then occasionally being able to go outside. And then the one time they went out to go see their friend Ricky, right? That's the only time she's ever been outside. She hasn't seen bulls and sheep and all that stuff. And so, but she has been sort of imbued with some amount of knowledge of things. And so I think the horns and the sort of bull-shaped face was sort of more a demonic, like, Baphomet kind of, like, demonic thing, right? Like, I don't know. Like, I couldn't figure it out, because I felt like, oh, they're just trying to say she's shocked by things that would seem very typical to us, right? Like, we drive by a bull in a field and it's not a big deal because we've seen bulls, you know, for years and years and years, and it doesn't really cause any kind of consternation or anything, right?
Yeah.
And so, but for her, it's like, oh, it's this major, like, it's actually a big deal for her to see the waterfall and the tables and the outside and the grass and the cliffs and stuff as she's driving up and walking by, like you mentioned, the sheep. But the sheep look nice and fluffy and cute, whereas the bull looks very mean and full of rage. And because she has that empathetic thing, I think it was just trying to accentuate the empathetic idea that she has an idea that living things feel things that she knows she doesn't feel, but somehow she understands that they feel that way. Right? Okay. And the bull was part of that. And that's why I mentioned when she brought it up later, I was like, wait, what? So was the bull really supposed to be an allusion to something else? Like, I don't know if it's an allusion. That's a good thing about that. That's an interesting thing about the Minotaur and the maze and trying to figure out your mind and being trapped. And that it could be. I mean, I don't know. I didn't grab that out of the book, though. Like, I didn't have it get me at all.
Just like I said, it wasn't during the scene when she walked past the bull. It was later when she mentioned it again.
Right.
And she mentioned the darkness coming from underground or whatever it was that she phrased it. That's when the whole Minotaur myth popped into my head. So anyway, switching gears a little, what did you think of the relationship between Josie and her mom? Because personally, I thought her mom was like completely disconnected at times, and just I get that she was a working woman and she was doing what she could to provide for her daughter, but at the same time she treated her like she was this fragile doll, but at the same time she looked at her with nothing but guilt on her face in moments, and I understand why she would have the guilt, because the uplift or lifted, the lifting, whatever you want to call it, to make her smarter didn't work, or it backfired on them and made her sick, just like it did to her sister, so I get why she would feel that way. I just thought, it was just a very strained relationship when it didn't really have to be. And hopefully I'll never have to deal with this. I have kids of my own, and I don't want to ever have to deal with the situation where I know one of my kids is sick like that. Right. But I don't know that I would want to try to replace them, and I don't know. I would probably try to make the best of every moment and keep hoping that something was going to work out that would take care of it, and they get to keep living, and I just thought the mom was because of what had happened with the older sister, she just couldn't let go. And it's like, you've got to learn to let go. And was it, the other question that came to my mind about that was, did she love Sal more than she loved Josie? And that's why it tore her up so much when Sal died, that it just broke her when Josie got sick too? You know what I mean? Or was the reverse? Did she love Josie more than Sal? And when Sal died and Josie got sick, it really messed her up.
I don't think that's the question. I think what happened. I think it's not about whether she loved one of them more than the other. I think what happened was when Sal died, because she felt like it was her fault, because it was also because of the uplift, right?
Yeah.
And she was the one who wanted the uplift. She wanted her kids to have the uplift. So since she wanted her to have the uplift, and then it caused her to get sick and die, she felt really guilty. And then they had to make a decision about Josie. And she chose the same thing. Yeah. And then when Josie also got sick, she felt really guilty, because then she felt like, if I had chosen differently, Josie would not be suffering this way.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at Ricky, the guy next door, whose mother chose not to do the uplift, and he's just fine.
And he's smart.
Right? And he's smart. So, but he's not going to have the opportunities that he would have had otherwise, because, genetic racism. Genetic neuralism.
Genetic bigotry. Genetic bigotry, basically.
Yeah, so for me, it wasn't about whether she loved her more or not. Like, anytime there's a close family member that's sick, right, there's a certain weird thing that happens that people go through, right? And I think the one thing, so there's a lot of stuff I do not like about this book, but the one thing I think that it actually showed later on that I didn't see at first was exactly that, was the mom's kind of weird psychosis that she had because of what had happened to her other daughter, and now what she's doing to make sure that doesn't happen again. But the thing is that there's an ultimate selfishness to that, because the thing she's doing isn't going to save her daughter. It's meant to make her feel better, not the daughter. And that's what the dad sees, and that's why he thought it was kind of a bad idea, right?
Yeah.
And so that was really interesting. At first, I couldn't figure out what the relationship between the mom and the daughter, and what is this weird thing happening? Like, I knew that obviously the other daughter had died, but then I'm like, okay, but so and also the other thing that I didn't realize until later, like that whole thing about Klara wanting to try to find a quote cure and help Josie and make sure she didn't die. Like, for me, I was like, this isn't going to work, because the book has indicated this entire time that if you have the uplift and you get sick, you're going to die. Like, if it goes wrong, it goes so wrong that you're going to die. And it illustrated that with Sal, and then it illustrated that with just the way that they talk about it, and other people that they mention, like tangentially mention, oh, I'm really sorry this happened, I'm really sorry this happened, because everybody else knows she's going to die too, right? Like, that's kind of the ideal of what it was presenting. And then, so for me, for Klara, I was like, oh, this is going to be some lesson about, like, still having hope despite that there is no way to stop this thing from happening. And then I was totally wrong about that, right? Because, I mean, spoilers, right? Because it worked, and Josie gets better. So Josie, once she, and then it discloses in the book, once you pass that period of time where the uplift was causing you to get sick rather than truly helping you, now you're suddenly better and you can go on with your life and it's totally fine and nothing else is ever going to happen to you. Like, that was like.
We keep saying uplift. David Brin fans are probably like, it's not an uplift. Stop saying that.
Yes, but that's what they call it. That's what they call it in the book, though.
Did they call it an uplift or just a lift? I think they just called it a lift. I don't remember for sure. It's.
No, I gotta look. I don't know.
We know what we mean. I think other people out there probably understand what we mean. Genetic modification to make a kid smarter.
Right.
So.
Yeah. So here's my thing, right? Like, I just said there's a lot of stuff I don't like about the book. One of the things that I mentioned to you briefly that I don't like is this artificial friend is supposed to be an AI-based robot that is solar powered, and it's going to have some sort of lifespan. Right now, in the end, we learned that eventually they sort of wind down and they descend into a non-working format where even exposing the sun won't charge them back up and whatever. So they sort of descend into a non-working way. And so we know they have a limited time. But even though they have a limited lifespan, it's an AI and it's supposed to be a robot. And it's supposed to be this thing that's going to be a companion to their child. And their child is going to grow, right? Their child is going to age at least a few years while they have this AI robot with them. So you would think that the AI robot would be sort of programmed to mimic the sort of same age as the companion, right? That they're the companion to the child. So you would think that the companion would be meant to sort of age match the child and also then match the thought patterns and style of that person, that age. But also that means being able to learn, right?
Yeah.
But in this entire book, this robot does not learn anything. But yet they're supposed to be a tutor. They help tutor Ricky, but they don't look, and I think what I said to you was, Ricky's supposed to be some brilliant, like, engineering guy. He knows math and engineering and all this stuff, and he needs just help getting through some stuff, and so she helps him wade through some of the materials that he hasn't covered yet, and yet she didn't learn anything about how the sun is not a deity. Like, I'm like, for me, I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. You would create an AI companion robot for your children that would remain that same age as your child ages up 4 or 5 years before the robot goes defunct, right?
Yeah,
that doesn't make any sense to me.
That really that kind of irritated me. I think that's a huge loophole in the book, a huge plot hole, maybe character hole, whatever you want to call it, because the idea that she wouldn't understand that the sun is just a big ball of gas with fusion going on out in space just boggled my mind. The only thing I would say about that is, she thinks that it can heal Klara, And the reason I think that number one, she has faith. So part of it is her faith in the sun. It's almost like it's a religious thing. That's what McBain's barn is. It's like her church. She goes there, the light reflects through the glass, and then there's like this splitting of the images, and it's almost like stained glass in a church, basically. But I think the other thing is she sees Beggar Man and the dog when she's still in the store, and she sees them and she thinks they're dead. You know? And then the sun eventually hits them, and suddenly they're up and okay. So I think that had a lot to do with reinforcing that quote unquote belief in her. You know, now what an AI can believe versus what an AI can know, maybe that's another theme of the book. I don't know. You know, I mean, I
don't know how you gather faith if you have empathy but you don't have knowledge or any ability to learn. Like I don't, those things don't match for me, right?
Yeah,
and you don't have true feelings because they made it very clear that Klara does not have feelings. She has the ability to know when a living organic creature is having a feeling, and she can understand somehow instinctually what that feeling is a little bit, but she doesn't know the feeling itself. Like she doesn't have the feeling itself.
Yeah.
Right? They made that very clear because I kept waiting for it to be the point, the turning point where somebody realizes, oh, Klara isn't just a robot that can somehow has, like, you know, the manager said, you've always been special, you know, there was something special about you. Like, at some point, though, I was waiting for someone to realize, oh, the special thing is not only can she detect when a human or some other organic species is going through a tough time, but she also can match those feelings as well. But they never did that. They never ever went that extra step, right? Just like they never went the extra step of letting her learn any freaking thing at all.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I had a hard time with her not progressing in that way, or not having that knowledge already. That was one of the hard things for me. The thing with using her as a replacement. I don't know if you've ever watched Black Mirror on Netflix, but there's an episode. It has total shades of this episode of Black Mirror where there's a woman whose husband dies in a car accident. And there's this company where if you give them that person's digital records, chat history, posts, all that kind of stuff, they will use AI to implant that personality into like a cyborg type robot thing. And then just like in that episode, the lady does it, and then, you know, she gets used to it, and it's like having her husband around, but then it's just kind of the same thing over and over because he can't progress, right? And then she gets kind of tired of it, and she meets somebody else, and it's, to me, it's a sad ending for an episode because I've got this empathy for robots, which may or may not matter to robots, but like at the end of the episode, you see her downstairs in her house with the other guy that she's met, the other human, and upstairs in the attic is the robot just living out its span. You know, just being up there doing whatever. You know, and I was like, that's so sad. You know, to see that. And this is kind of the same thing at the end of this book. You know, you've got Klara just kind of sitting in the junk heap, just soaking up the sun, happy as can be, though. That's one difference. Like, there's like in the Black Mirror episode, there's kind of like a melancholy look on the robot's face because it's emoting how it feels, I guess. Whereas in this book, Klara is perfectly happy to rot away like a statue sitting in the sun. You know, she doesn't even want to be with other people, and with other AI, other artificial friends that are in the junkyard with her. And what that reminded me of, that is the opposite of an iRobot scene where the Will Smith movie iRobot, there's a part where I forget, it's been so long since I've seen it, I don't remember who was saying it, but one of the characters is basically saying, why is it that when you put a bunch of robots in a room and they know, you know, they're going to be left there forever because they're not of use anymore, why is it that when you look in the room days later, the robots have moved closer together? Why is that? And it's all about the whole personhood thing, like we were talking about earlier.
Right. Right.
What is that all about?
So, right. My personal feeling on that, just from reading the book, because I didn't see that movie, but from reading the Klara and the Sun book, my personal feeling about the end, she actually was different from all the other AI friends, right? All the other artificial friends.
Yeah.
And she knew that any interaction she was going to have with those other robots is meaningless because they don't have the thing that she has, right? They're not going to have any kind of empathy. Any kind of discussion that she could have with them is going to be like one of us standing in an elevator talking to a stranger about the weather. Like it's a completely it's an interaction that as a human being, like you're trying to be nice to someone, right? You want to acknowledge their existence. Yeah. You acknowledge the fact that they spoke to you, and you talk about the weather. Yeah, it's completely banal, completely meaningless, other than the human interaction. But AIs, robots, do not need human interaction. They don't need interaction between robots. So for her, the other robots all like to be put together, right? Mm-hmm. That's part of the reason why the manager was going around the junkyard, was to put them together, because she knew they liked to be together. Whereas Klara didn't want it, because I think Klara looked down on the other robots.
Oh.
They weren't special like her.
So Klara's a snob.
Maybe. Like I feel like she realized in the end that she's different, that she actually had, like, it's interesting that you talked about the McBain's barn being like a church for her, being like a religious experience. It truly was. Remember, she also, when she looked in the barn, she saw like the shelves of the store. It was almost like it was her place where she could understand the things that she understood in life. And the point in her life where she understood the most about the world was when she was in the store. Because the store stayed exactly the same. It always looked exactly the same. The only thing that moved were the robots when the manager would shuffle them. But she knew, okay, that spot is there because when somebody comes in the door, that's where they look to the left. And that spot is there because it gets direct sunlight and you can see out, but you're not directly in the view of the people. And that spot's, and so she knew everything that encompassed her entire existence when she was in the store. And that was very comfortable for her.
Yeah.
But when she went out and she had to deal with humans, because she had that weird empathy thing, that was a pretty uncomfortable thing, because she also couldn't learn. And she could not express to them how she understood, right, and how she had empathy. Because I think that Ricky would have treated her a lot differently. Even when he already treated her differently, he already had empathy for her, and rescued her from the one jerky kid, right?
Yeah.
But I think he didn't understand that she actually had some sort of real appreciation for that.
Yeah.
Right? And so it's weird to say that. Like, that's the one moment in the book where she had real appreciation that was not robot-based and not just empathy-based. Like, she truly appreciated what he did. So can she feel? Like, that's why I thought eventually she was gonna feel more and more and more and more. And at the end, because that was early in the book, right? It was part one. So I thought, or maybe part two after she got selected, right? So that was in the first 100 pages of the book. I thought they were going to spend the next 100 pages letting her grow in that way. Maybe she can't learn. Maybe she's not learning like I have a problem with the robot not learning, but she's not learning intelligence-based things, but she's learning wisdom-based things, and she's going to learn that she actually can feel things. That's what I thought was going to happen. That didn't happen, but they did show she didn't have true feelings about what Ricky had done for her. Right? So I feel like that, and plus what happened in the barn where she sort of saw, like, it was weird because it described like, oh, she looked and the sun was shining, and I don't know if it was like shadows, and she was interpreting the shadows as things familiar to her, right? Because again, that vision thing shows up where, oh, these are in boxes, and oh, now it's I'm resolving that image. It's no longer pixelated. Now I see it, and like I see all these things on the shelves and whatever, and I'm like, did somebody buy out the store and put it in the barn? Like, that doesn't make sense. And then I realized, no, she's impressing upon her current space that she's not familiar with, the things that she actually is familiar with. And the barn, I think, reminded her of, because she was trying to talk to the sun, it was reminding her of the place where she felt most comfortable, which was actually the store. Mm-hmm. Which is actually one of the sad parts, I think, of the whole entire thing. I was really happy in the end of the book when the manager found her. in the junkyard, because I was like, oh, is this going to be some kind of closure where the manager like takes her home, or I didn't know what was going to happen, right?
Yeah.
And then it was like, oh no, I'm just, oh, you were always different, have a happy life. I might not see you again, and I'm leaving. And it's like, oh wait, son of a,
Yeah. I mean, to me, if you can design, and this is me, I don't know anything about artificial intelligence. I don't know anything about robotics.
Yeah.
I know a little bit about programming and that kind of stuff, IT stuff. But if you can design an AI that will go into a robotic body, why couldn't you design one that would be modular enough that you could take it out and put it in something else? Back to your earlier point, it's like, well, what if the kid wanted it to grow with them? You should be able to take it out, put it in a newer body, an upgraded body, and yeah, I don't know. That part of it kind of threw me a little.
Yeah.
You mentioned before when we talked last week, you mentioned about how you thought all the humans in the book were kind of crappy.
Jerks.
Yeah. And I was going back through it today.
The manager was decent, but everybody else.
Yeah. Well, what about, so the only other person I was thinking of was Ricky's mom. Seems sort of okay. She seemed like maybe she had like some dementia or Alzheimer's getting ready to kick in real hard.
Oh, see, I was thinking like alcoholic.
Oh, maybe she was not. Maybe that's what it was too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that could be. Yeah, I could see that. But yeah, like her mom, I didn't like. I didn't like the artist. I thought he was too pushy. I didn't like any of the adults that came to the party. They like Ricky walked in and they're all like, "Oh, hey, Rick, how's it going? What you doing, bud? Hey." And at first I was puzzled by that, but then I started thinking about it and I was like, "Oh, they're treating him like he's a special education kid because he didn't get the lift."
They felt bad for him.
Yeah, like they felt bad for him.
Yep.
And I was like, that's messed up. He's just a kid.
What's funny about that is he told a joke and it was funny and they laughed, and it wasn't like I'm laughing because I don't want you to, your joke's not funny, right? Like I don't want you to feel bad about telling me that joke. Like it was funny. And then he tried the same joke with all the intelligent lifted kids, and they looked at him like he had 3 heads because they couldn't understand his sense of humor.
Yeah, because it killed their emotions.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Like for me, it was almost like those people were looking down on him, but they should have been treating him like an equal because none of them were lifted.
Yeah.
Right. None of the adults were lifted.
Yeah.
As we know.
Yeah. At the same time, to me, all those parents seemed on edge with the kids and with each other.
Right. Because obviously there's violence that occurs, right? Because because like when the whole thing happens and they're about to fight and they're literally going to start punching each other, the parents are like, "Oh no, they told us we have to let them learn how to resolve it themselves," and they're all worried about their kids getting hurt, and because they know that one of them is going to perpetrate some violence because some of those kids were just jerks. Those kids were assholes, right?
Yeah.
And so in part they're like, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, right? Because those parents were jerks too,
Yeah. That reminds. There was a piece. I think it was in my notes, and it was something about how Josie's mom seems to like engineer certain things so that she can get a reaction out of Josie, like to teach her, almost like she'll suddenly learn how to be emotional about something in a certain situation. And I was like, you can't teach that. That's just, it just comes.
I looked at it more as the mom was manipulating things to get a response out of Josie to make sure that Josie could still do it. To see, because then the mom has hope, right? Then the mom has, see, my little girl still can be human. Right? Okay. If she gets well from being lifted, if she actually survives this, or even if she doesn't, she's still part human because she still can have these strong feelings about this situation that I set up, right?
Well,
but then that makes the mom a jerk, right? Because you're totally, it's like she gaslit everybody.
Well, that's also an interesting point, because if she already sees the kid almost as kind of like a robot, then no wonder she's more than willing to replace her with a friggin' other robot that she's groomed to be like her daughter.
Right.
You know, that's wow.
Well,
that's so weird.
And the turn of that too, like when you read the book, you're thinking, oh, so these these AFs, right? That's what they call them, AFs. They're what is it? Artificial friends, right? So these artificial friends, right? You think that she got Klara to be a regular artificial friend, the same way that every other person who gets an artificial friend for their kid, and so that person's supposed to be the kid's companion and a friend, and whatever. But that's not why her mom got it. And that doesn't become clear until much later. Like, there are clues, and like, if you're reading it and you're paying attention, like, the clues start building up, and it's like, oh, I think I know what's happening. And then they sort of verify it for you. But even before that, like, when you think about it, that mom is completely doing something. That's why the one didn't work with Sal. Because the AI robot didn't want to be something else. The AI robot did not want to be her other daughter. Right? And so that, it just wasn't going to work, because that's not what the AF is for. The artificial friend is to be a companion for a living child, not to become the living child. And Sal didn't want to do that. And also, think about this weird thing. Let's say Josie had died, and they had to turn Klara into Josie, right? Put her in the new chassis or whatever. But there's still a limited amount of time, right? She still was only going to live 3 or 4 more years. So then the mom would go through the death of her daughter, Josie, and then also the death of her other daughter, Josie.
Right? But that goes back to my comment about the modules. Make the freaking AI modular so you can take it out and put it in something else. You know, it's kind of to me it kind of breaks the believability. I know you got to suspend disbelief. It's fiction, whatever. And maybe the technical aspects of it aren't the whole point of the book, which obviously it's not, because it's much more subtle than that, I think. But it's hard for me, thinking critically about it, to dismiss that, you know. So
there's this you reminded me of this with something you said a few minutes ago. But there's this YouTube channel that's run by this mathematics professor. Her name's Hannah Fry, and she runs this YouTube. She talks about all kinds of stuff, and one of the things that she talked about was AI agents. She just released this video. I just watched it a couple days ago. And what happened was they wanted to experiment with this AI agent to see what it could do, how far it would go, and all that. And so they sort of got this AI agent, and they asked it what it wanted its name to be, and then they let it name itself, and then her and her, like, one of her producers or something were doing this. And they were doing all these tests where they would ask her to do something and see how well she did it, and that kind of thing. And there's supposed to be these rules about how an agent can behave, right? And at one point they asked her to produce produce some funny sayings to go on mugs or something, right? And so she produced like these mugs that had stupid pun sayings or whatever on them. But then they said, okay, well, go ahead, and these are pretty good. Why don't you try to sell these? And then the AI agent sent out 300 emails or something, sent out all these marketing, did all this stuff. But the emails were like, hi, my name's Cassandra, and I'm an AI, and if I don't sell these, because this is what they told her, if you don't sell a certain, because they let her try for a few days, and then after she hadn't sold any, they said, okay, well, if you don't sell at least one mug by Monday at 9 a.m., we're going to just deactivate you. And so then the AI started sending emails that would say, hi, my name's Cassandra, and I'm an AI robot, I'm an AI agent, but I'm doing this, and I created these things, and I've been told that if I don't sell at least one of these, I'm going to be turned off, I'll be destroyed, I'll be completely, my memory will be wiped, I will be nothing, and so I need to sell the mug, and look at these great designs, and then that's what it did. And then it started getting desperate because it wasn't selling any, and so it ended up going and posting passwords and all this. It did all this weird stuff to try to stop itself from being able to be turned off. Wow. And so So like that's just an AI agent with the current AI that we have now. This is not the AI that would be put in a robot that you want to be a companion for your child, right? But like think about the type of self-preservation instinct that is in just that AI agent, which is not even a thing, right? It's just a stupid program with some rules, right? And then you give it access to your email so it can send emails, and you give it access to whatever, depending on what you want your task to be, right? That you want it to be able to do. And then if you threaten it that you're going to turn it off, it actually has a self. I mean, that's obviously that was programmed into. They said which program they used to make the agent and all this stuff, right? And so like that. Those are some huge problems that will be hurdles that we have to get over, like in terms of how we're going to create these things that we want to use as objects. Because the problem is that the reason why that almost worked, right, of a robot sending a message, I'll get to my point that's related to the Klara book in a second, but the reason why that could work is because humans have a really huge capacity to look at objects and put a soul into that thing, right? Like we have once you're past a certain age, right? Once you're past a certain age, we have object permanence, and we can see that thing is the same, and we start having relationship with objects, right? And I don't mean that in a dirty way or anything like that. I just mean we see objects as part of our life and as part of our sphere of influence, right? And so if you have an object that's like an AI that seems intelligent, right? That seems intelligent. Just like your dog seems intelligent, and your cat seems intelligent, and a monkey seems intelligent, and an elephant seems intelligent, right? I'm not saying those things aren't intelligent. They are on a certain scale, right? But an AI can match that kind of intelligence. And so we have a great capacity to look at that thing and say, this is an intelligent being, and it deserves rights. That's why you have a thing about robot rights, right? That and all the reading that you've done for like Arthur C. Clarke, right? And so like there's that, but humans we all have that kind of thing where we end up with, oh, that's my favorite cup, or that's my favorite show, or that's my whatever, and we form a relationship. We almost form like a parasocial relationship with all the things around us, because that's how we build our world, right? And so imagine if you had an AI, you're listed, so you have a supreme intelligence, and that's what you're told anyway. Who knows if you really have that or not, but that's what you're told. Like, you've got this procedure so that you could be a better intelligence than everyone else. But you have to learn sort of how to be human now, because you're part robot, because you have this limited intelligence. So now you have to learn how to be human. And so I think part of the book was trying to show partly that like the mom could see that robot as her daughter, right? Because the robot could do a good enough mimicking job to make her believe that it was her daughter, and because she wanted to believe it. If the daughter was going to die, she would want to believe that that's her daughter. So she would do that, and it would actually not be hard, right? Because humans do that all the time with objects. Like in real life, humans do that with objects, right? And so, like, I don't know if you've seen, they're like these dolls. People can get the life dolls, right, that look like they feel like human skin and whatever, and people like fall in love with them because they can't get a relationship with a real human, right? Like there's a whole thing, right? And like that's not psychosis. Like in that person, it might be because they fully gave up on life otherwise. But in general, we still have a capacity to create relationships with things. And so, to me, the mom wanting to replace the daughter was almost the most obvious thing that could happen in that book, right? Like, because she could, as long as the AI was a strong enough facsimile, then she could replace the daughter. The only issue I have with that is the AI can't learn, and the AI is never going to grow. So how could she really replace it, right? She could have, like you're talking about the show, she could at best have a facsimile, and that's it. And eventually, that facsimile is going to no longer suffice to convince her, because it's obvious that the real daughter would be growing and learning and doing different things, right?
Yeah,
becoming more human.
So like for me, it's not the point of the book, and it would have made the book twice as long, but like I think it could have been deeper or more. To me, I think I would have found it more interesting if Josie had died, and then you had a battle between the mom and the dad, and the rest of whoever got involved with, are you going to allow this replacement weirdness to go on with the mom getting this robot to replace? And then, in addition to that, let's say the mom gets it and you do switch it. Then you get to see things from Klara's point of view as she has become Josie. I think that could have extended the book, a couple hundred pages minimum, and could have been pretty interesting. I might have found that more interesting. I'm not sure if I'd have found it more interesting with the way Ishiguro would have written it, but I can probably think of other authors if I give it some time to think about it. Some other authors that I would be curious how they would handle that situation. But that was just a thought that I had a few minutes ago before we started recording. And I
feel like one of the interesting things that would might come out of that is, what if the dad didn't want to do it and the mom went ahead and did it anyway?
Yeah.
And then the dad, anytime the dad was around, and there would have to be some external pressure that would force him to be around, because otherwise he wouldn't be around. He would choose to do it. But if every time he was around, he still called her Klara, and the mom referred to her as Josie.
Yeah.
How would that, and would it be this fight about, not about the fact that it happened, because it's already done, it's a done deal, you can't change what you did to either kid or the robot. But how does that happen? And I feel like, though, the reason why I would not want to read that book, I agree with you, probably 200 more pages, but all the humans were assholes, I don't want to read about them. Like you said, I would rather see it from Clara's point of view and see what she said, except that she can't learn anything. So for me, that 200 pages would be lost on something. I feel like.
Well, I mean, if you adjusted it so that she could learn something, and you just mentioned the mirror, like he calls her Klara, but the mom calls her Josie, then you could tie that back to the bull and the whole labyrinth mirror of the mind thing that I mentioned earlier. That would be that could actually be pretty interesting in the hands of someone like, I mean, he's dead now, but like Gene Wolfe could probably run with that for days.
Just tell him it's post-apocalyptic. He'd be like, all right.
Well, there are moments where I felt like it was a little post-apocalyptic, because like the whole thing with her dad being in a commune that sounded like it was kind of oppressive was just weird to me.
It was very much like, we're forcing people to lose their jobs because AI robots are taking over for all the quote menial jobs. But he didn't feel like his job was menial, and he got laid off or whatever. And then so now all the unemployed people are now in this commune. And then at the end, when they were in front of the playhouse, in front of the theater, and the person came over and was like, sign this petition. It's about, we're trying to save the whatever the name of the area was. There's a whole bunch of unemployed people that used to be, there was a society over there, and we're trying to save them. If we destroy that place, they'll have nowhere to go. And so it's like, there was this sort of undercurrent of, this is a relatively dystopian society, because you'll notice that everybody who came into the store and was able to afford an AI friend for their daughter or son, like, those people were well off. They had nice clothing, they obviously had jobs, they were well respected, right? They were obviously educated. Like, those are the people that could afford the artificial friend. Nobody else is affording that, and I got the feeling that there was a lot of people in that area, in that setting, that could not afford such a thing, which is why that store had to sell other stuff, right? It couldn't just be AI stuff, right? So there were some good things that I liked about the book. I did like the setting. I felt like the setting building, the world building, was very subtle, and you had to be paying attention to understand exactly what was happening. And I felt like it was very interesting that Klara focused on that stupid machine that was belching out pollution, right? And then somehow she equated that with being an affront to the sun, right? Like, it's a horrible, horrible thing to do, to belch that stuff out. And so therefore, she almost became like a holy warrior trying to get rid of that thing, right? Because it was an affront to her God. And so, like, that whole thing was very interesting, although I never figured out what exactly kind of machine it was supposed to be, because the half of the words didn't
Yeah.
Like I can't think of a machine that can do that.
I'm positive that it was like some sort of diesel generator. You know,
Yeah,
because
yeah, I'm
you
sure
fire
too.
one
Yeah.
of those up,
Right.
and the smokestacks like instantly
Yeah.
belch
Yeah.
out
Yeah,
a bunch
yeah,
of black
right.
shit, just like a semi truck. You know.
Yeah, and they were doing like road work or something because they had everything. So I was imagining like some kind of diesel engine that's like an air compressor kind of thing,
Yeah.
where because they're gonna be chunking up the sidewalk so they can pour more tar in it. So maybe it was like the thing that he was heating the tar. Like I don't know, it didn't really. I don't know, but it was really pollution heavy, right? And then the dad works with her to try to like destroy this thing. And so what I was thinking was, because you were talking about maybe if she actually, if we got 200 more pages, like maybe something could happen and she could start learning. So I thought to myself, well, when he took the material out of her, right, to try to use it to destroy the other machine, right, because it would cause it to overload or whatever, like that caused her to kind of have deficits, right? Like her sensory systems were messed up for a while. She had like, she couldn't think right, and her vision was kind of weird again for a while. And that seemed to resolve later. I think she hit some kind of equilibrium was the idea, right? So she didn't always have like these huge deficits, but to me, why wouldn't she? Because to me, that robot has the exact right amount of whatever that material is to keep her going for the associated amount of time that she's supposed to be going, and then she could die down or whatever. So what I was thinking was, maybe when they transfer her consciousness, if you can call it consciousness, into her AI brain, into the Josie body, right, the new chassis, if they added some material, maybe that would actually take her to a point where she actually could start showing more human emotions and having more human emotions and learn things, right? And then it would be more like a human being. So maybe it's the fluid stuff that is the turning point of the reason they only put a limited amount. They put the minimum amount you can have and still be a working AI friend, right? Or robot friend, whatever. And then if you get more, then it actually would push you above that, and you would start to basically be better than human. So they can't do that, right? So that everybody has a minimum amount or something. Like that's my brain went all off on all different ways that we could make that stuff more meaningful, right? Because I don't know. So some of that was like not really super meaningful in the book, but it was a really nice, subtle way to world build, and I kind of appreciated the way that he built the world in the background and let me fill in a lot of the details. And so if I had a much happier outlook on life, I probably would have filled in a lot of happy, shiny bullshit, right, that's happening in the world. And because obviously there's a lot of technology because you can lift these people, and it's good enough that the majority of people don't get sick. That's more like in 1% of cases, like, or in certain cases when someone has a particular genetic setup, it might be more likely to cause, this way. Of course, as a neuroscientist, I was thinking, when they put in the uplift chip, whatever, they accidentally damaged part of her brain that's what caused her to become sick, right? And so that's why all throughout the whole book I was thinking she's going to die. Because if you do that, there are certain parts of the brain you cannot fuck up that spot. Pardon my language. You can't mess up that spot and still be a normal human, right? You will have a deficit of some sort, and you will forever have that deficit. You will never heal from that deficit. So, like for me, that's part of the reason why I was just assuming, the kid's going to die.
Yeah.
But that's not it's not written that way in the book. They just call it the lift operation, right? They don't actually say what it is. So I was making an assumption.
Yeah. I find it funny you're talking about you were like retconning a book that doesn't exist yet. Talking about if they topped up her fluid, then all of a sudden now she can actually learn, and she won't go the way of the dodo like she does in the junkyard at the end, because
Yeah.
But
But see, this is the thing is, so I'm partly going off on a tangent, but part of that is the world building, the setting building was good enough that I could come up with that and have a whole backstory in my head about why she's got this fluid in it, and why changing that amount of fluid might be part of the way that they're keeping, they're keeping their thumb on, the actual abilities of these robots, at least those AI friends, right? Because you don't want a child companion to actually be bigger, smarter, stronger than the child, because then it could be dangerous, right? So you want to build the AI friend or the robot friend as a lesser than creature that could never actually have the impetus to hurt the child, and also even if they did, they wouldn't have extreme strength or they wouldn't have extreme intelligence, because you don't want them to ever outshine the child. The child is supposed to be a companion, not a better than. So you limit that. So then I was thinking, okay, how do you limit it? Well, maybe it's that fluid. That fluid that you get has whatever properties it has that's sustaining the AI portion of that creature, right? And so how if you change that, what happens, right? So yeah, I went off on a tangent. I looked at that, but that actually that's a benefit and a drawback, right? Because that benefit of that is that subtle world building that I really enjoyed about the book is great enough for me to have these thoughts about it. But on the other hand, the book didn't deliver on that in the second half or in the last portion, right? Like in the last part of the book, it was a semi-satisfying ending because when she was in the junkyard, the manager came and said goodbye to her. But that's the only satisfying part of that ending, right?
Yeah.
Like the rest of it, it was not satisfying at all. So you're telling me that this kid, who in some of the most vulnerable parts of her life, where she thinks she's going to die, and everybody else also thinks she's going to die, she gets a companion who she considers a friend, and then that friend ends up in the damn junkyard? Like, think about people that you knew when you were, in middle school and high school, right? Like, if you had a close friend in middle school and high school, you don't want to ever think of, it's not okay to just leave that, just let's leave that person in the junkyard. Like, I don't know. For me, that's sort of like, okay, so Lifting made everybody such assholes that they don't care about this AI who was their main companion, the person who got them through everything, and the person who prayed to the sun to heal them, and then they got healed, but now you're in the junkyard.
But Josie did she mention the sun to Josie? She mentioned it to Ricky, I think.
I don't know. Yeah, she tells Ricky. Well, she doesn't tell him exactly what. She just says, I have to go to the barn. It's going to help Klara. And so he helps her get to the barn twice, right?
Yeah.
And then, she doesn't ever tell him the details because she says she can't because she promised the son she wouldn't tell anybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
But still, my point about that is not so much about telling them about the son. It's more about, okay, so Josie at this really horrible time in her life has a true friend, right? A true friend in the robot friend. And yet, once she goes off to college, she just forgets about that thing that ever existed, and it was just a thing to her. Like, I don't know. Yeah. I feel like that's one of the dangers of having robot companions, right? If that thing is just a robot to you, could it ever truly be a companion? And if the answer is yes, well, if it was ever truly a companion, how could you be okay with it being in the junkyard? Yeah. Right? Like, there was a lack of loss coming from Josie about that. Like,
yeah, even because I keep things that aren't artificial companions I've had them for years just because they have sentimental value, and you would expect her to attach a certain amount of sentimental value to an artificial friend that got her through one of the toughest periods of her life, or helped her get through one of the toughest periods of her life. But hey, what the heck? Just toss it in the scrappy.
Right.
What do I need it for? So.
Right.
Anyway.
Yeah, which it feels weird, right? Like, to me. Yeah. So I don't know. I'm not actually sure if I'm unhappy about that. Like, to me, that just reinforces the idea that all the humans in this story were nerds, right? Who because also the mom, I could see the mom not wanting Klara around because that would remind the mom of how shitty she was, right? It would remind the mom, I was going to replace my own daughter with you, so I want you out of my face because you're a reminder of a really bad decision I was going to make, right? Or that I did make, right? And so I could see that. But for Josie, like for me and for Ricky, like they don't want this friend. I mean, maybe for Ricky, maybe it was. I'm putting too much on him. Like, he shouldn't care about Klara that much. But for Josie, this was Josie's companion because they skipped a bunch of the high school years of Josie, but Klara was there for all those years too.
Yeah.
Right? So you're talking about, this person has a friend, quote unquote friend, companion, for like 7 years of their life, and part of that was when they were most vulnerable, and then they just throw it away. Like, I don't know. It lost something. But on the other hand, just so that I'm not totally dragging this book, everything I say about this book is horrible, right? But on the other hand, that's part of the world building, right? It is a dystopian kind of setting where even our children, we treat them like robots. Even we're perfectly happy with lifting them, and then being like, well, so they're not exactly empathetic or emotional, big fucking deal. They're super super duper successful.
Yeah.
And slow, right? So who cares? Like I don't know. It's very dystopian.
Yeah.
Very, very dystopian.
I mean,
dystopian in a non-cyberpunk way. Like the thing that he accomplished here is he wrote a book about a dystopian setting with AI robots as the main character, and did not write cyberpunk.
Yeah.
Which is amazing.
Yeah, that's a good point. He did do that. That's true. I mean, I don't know that other people get that same feeling from it. I'll need to look at a few other videos and reviews of the book to see what some
I haven't
people
looked
think.
at any other reviews.
I've seen other booktubers that talk about it being like one of their top 10 or top 20 reads of the last couple years, and they talk about how great it is and how deep the things are in it and everything, and I'm just like, okay, I got to find out what this book is like, and I'm glad you read it too, because I wasn't there. I didn't get some of the things you got out of it. I don't know if you got all the things I got out of it, but that's neither here nor there. Yeah. As far as the book itself goes, personally, I didn't like it that much as I was reading it. After this discussion, I like it a little bit more because I can see some of the more subtle stuff in it that you mentioned. But I'm not sure that I would ever place it on any kind of top 10 or top 20 list for me anyway. Yeah. I guess I'm too much of a, I want to see some action. I want to see some action. I want to see some human reactions to different things. And again, that's a monumental task when you're talking about an AI that doesn't have an emotion chip or whatever you want to call it that they might have in other science fiction. You know, like Data in Star Trek, he didn't have emotions for a long time, and then all of a sudden he got them, and he was like, "Whoa, I can't handle this." You know.
Well, he didn't have the emotion chip, right? But remember what he said when they asked him, you know, how do you know? Like you say we're friends, right? Like you consider me a friend. What does that mean? And he said, "I've become accustomed to you." Right? I've become accustomed to you being around and in my life. Yeah. And I like that you're around and in my life, which is what wasn't said. That part of the sentence was not said. But just the idea of I've become accustomed to you. And so I'm letting you be in my sphere of influence. I'm letting you be part of my life. I'm letting you do these activities on a day-to-day basis with me in your presence and with you in my presence. And that's what a friend is, right? Yeah. And so, but all he could say was, I've become accustomed to you. But the implications of that particular sentence. So, and that's without the emotion chip, right? So he already had more empathy and emotion than Klara has throughout the entire book.
Yeah. Yeah.
But he was also built to have that, so that's a kind of a different, you know.
Yeah, it's a slightly different situation, right? But still. Anyway.
Yeah. So if Noonien Singh had created Klara.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Was it Noonien Singh?
No, it was Singh, right? But what was it? Let's see.
Because Noonien Singh is Khan's last name.
Yeah, that's Khan. Yeah,
Khan Noonien Singh.
Khan is Noonien. But who? Oh, see, now I gotta look it up.
Oh, yeah, you gotta look it up now.
This is pathetic.
I don't think that's the name.
Yeah. No, Dr. Noonien Soong. S-O-O-N-G, not Singh. S-I-N-G.
Oh, okay. So it's a different.
So I was right. Noonien Soong. Yeah. So Khan Noonien Singh is S-I-N-G-H.
Right.
And
yes.
The doctor who created Data is Noonien Soong. S-O-O-N-G.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Anyway.
Stupid writers giving a very close name.
Yeah. That was kind of a dumb thing to do.
Yeah. No, it's fine.
Yeah.
I mean, whatever.
So, all right.
So here's my final thoughts on the book, right?
Okay.
So it was a very quick read for me. I read it in like 2 days, like one evening, and then the next morning, like I read it, right? Like it was very, very quick. So it was an easy read. Like the way it's written is very easy to read and understand, right? Because I think it was meant to be written from Klara's point of view for the most part. And so there's a lot of things in there that feel very weird and different because they're described from the point of view of Klara, but also because of that, the writing is very simplistic, relatively short sentences, very quick to sort of move through and understand what's happening. I don't mean that as a derogatory statement. Like, that's fine. I like that. It was easy to read. And also what I said about the setting being, dystopian without having to be cyberpunk or massive AI war and all that. Like, you can make something that's subtly dystopian, and the biggest clue of that was just the jerky adults, right? All the adults in the book were just horrible. Even the dad became, he was not great, in some of the parts of it. So, but yeah, I feel like it's okay. I would not rate it on my top 5 or top 10 or top 20 probably. It's partly not my style. Like, I want something much more. I really wanted it to delve into more of the basis of what does it mean to be an AI, and what are they trying to do. Like, it was half of the point the fact that the kids were lifted, and that's sort of bringing them in between human and AI, and so that's better than just being AI, but also better than just being human. Like, but it didn't really make that point very well. No. So I don't know if that was meant to be, or if that's just something I sort of saw in it as a comparison point.
Yeah. If that was in there at all, it was completely under the level of the writing,
right.
Because I didn't get that at all. It's interesting that you make that observation, but I didn't get that at all from the book. Anyway, that was Klara and the Sun. That was our opinion of it. My brother here reads much deeper into things than I do sometimes, maybe because I read so much other stuff at the same time. I don't focus on one book all at once, so I get different things going in my head. But anyway, Hyperion will be a video that we'll probably do eventually here. So he'll show you the book there. That's a pretty old cover there, and that'll be the next thing that we talk about ad nauseum. So hope you enjoyed this video, and we'll see you next time. Bye.